There are some new developments in the deadly parasailing accident off of Fort Myers Beach that happened last July. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission released the findings to its investigation today. Fox-4 Shelbie Lynn has been following this story since the accident happened in July and has more on the new findings and newly released home video of the accident as it happened.
The Florida Fish and Wildlife today attributing last year's deadly parasail accident to operator negligence. But Captain Scott Siddon escapes any criminal charges. The state's attorney's office declaring a lack of evidence for criminal intent and say drug and alcohol tests are negative.
Well, you either have to find criminal intent or you have to find such gross negligence that rises, what they call culpable negligence in criminal cases, that rises to the level more than just carelessness or more than just simple negligence. And that's what we felt was lacking in the evidence here.
Taking you back to July 11th of last year, this home video capturing Elizabeth Straney and her teenage daughter visiting from Kentucky on a parasail flight that would cost them their lives. AA Parasail, the only company flying when these storm clouds take over the skies, producing strong winds and a choppy surf. Mother Nature proving to be too strong for the equipment to withstand. Deanna Galati and Sarah Collins watched this fatal fall from aboard Hang 'em High after a parasail flight of their own.
The harness, I guess, on them snapped, and they just fell, and they were just laying there, not moving. It was just horrible to watch.
Today, nearly a year later, state officials conclude their investigation and say it was these 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts and 3 to 4 foot seas that took its toll on equipment that was never designed for these kind of conditions.
Wind was so strong that it caused the harness which attached the riders to the boat to break, either the harness or the tow line.
Boat Captain Scott Siddon won't face a jury for the Straney deaths, but he will face their family in civil court. A source close to the victims' families tells Fox-4 News that a civil suit has already been filed. As for AA Parasail, Chris Schaub, owner of the company at the time of the accident, has reportedly sold it. He declined our request for an interview, but it appears that this fatal flight, along with the jet ski accident under a different company also owned by Schaub, may have been enough to drive him out of the watercraft business. Shelbie Lynn, Fox-4 News.
And the U.S. Coast Guard's investigation is still awaiting approval. Officials are hoping to release that report later this year.
Well,
a stabbing in the Cape may lead to one teenager being tried as an adult.
But first, how the deaths of 2 tourists last summer has impacted the parasailing industry. Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Seaton.
And I'm Beth Shelburne. It was an accident that shocked Southwest Florida. Since the deaths of a mother and daughter parasailing off of Fort Myers Beach last July, Fox-4 News has investigated the story, the safety of the water attraction, and the possible need for regulations. Fox-4 Shelbie Lynn has been on this story from day one. She joins us now. And Shelbie, how has the industry changed since last year's fatal flight?
Well, Beth, this crash last summer has sparked so much controversy as to who should be held responsible for the deaths of Hope and Taylor Straney. But because there are no regulations, it makes it so hard for officials to decide where to place the blame. Now, there have been more than a dozen deaths, almost 10,000 injuries, and still there are no regulations. But the industry is changing, and not necessarily for the better.
You may remember Mark McCullough, chairman of the Parasail Safety Council and hired by the U.S. Coast Guard. We talked to McCullough again today to find out how last year's crash has affected the parasail industry.
The changes have not been positive, let's put it that way.
McCullough says while operators seem to be more safety conscious, insurance companies appear to be more self-conscious. He says one company has changed its policy, imposing so many exclusions that it makes it virtually impossible for parasail operators to follow. He also says insurance rates have gone up. 3 companies have actually stopped selling parasail insurance, and that operators are knowingly purchasing cheap insurance from fraudulent companies.
Well, first of all, they're not licensed to sell in the states they're selling. And secondly, the insurance company they're telling people they're giving policies under is an offshore company that's located in St. Vincent that doesn't even have a license in St. Vincent.
McCullough fears the only 2 legitimate insurance companies left will stop selling parasail insurance and the sport will disappear altogether. But the tragic deaths of Hope and Taylor Straney last summer will never disappear, and Captain Scott Siddon will not face criminal charges.
The evidence in the case that was submitted to us was that the equipment failed, but not that anybody intentionally caused it to fail. Additionally, did the operators put these people in harm, knowing that they would get in harm's way, knowing that they would get injured, and no evidence to support that either.
Many people would argue that. Just look at these 3 to 4 foot waves, 30-mile-per-hour winds, and storm clouds captured on home video. Some say a licensed captain should know better. Fish and wildlife investigators say that the riser straps and tow line, both in new condition, snapped because of stress caused by high winds, a force parasail equipment isn't designed for. The vessel's operator, Scott Siddon, was negligent in that he failed to exercise prudence and good judgment when making the decision to conduct parasail operations. The weather conditions did not warrant safe operation for parasail rides. As a result of Siddon's actions, a catastrophic failure of the parasail equipment occurred. But the problem is that there are no regulations in the parasail industry. Operators just need to have a license from the Coast Guard in order to drive a boat. Keena Straney, now coping without his wife and daughter, plans on fighting for the standards that could have saved his family's life.
I just feel like that there needs to be really a whole lot more regulations.
Now, the U.S. Coast Guard is also investigating this case, and based on their findings, could recommend some kind of regulations. But despite their investigation, city or state officials could implement their own safety standards. But the problem is that increases liability, and it seems no one wants to be held responsible for when things go wrong. Chris, back to you.